Hello, all, and welcome to the third of four lectures for the Disability Movement, Etcetera series. I'm your host, Dr. Andy, and I'm broadcasting again today from my home office that I share with my amazingly artistic partner here in Denton, Texas, which is on occupied lands of the Wichita and Caddo affiliated tribes. For those with visual impairments or relying on the captions or transcripts to follow along our conversation, I am a white cisgendered male. I use he, him pronouns. I have blonde hair that's longer on the top and shorter on the sides that is styled smooth going from the front to the back. I'm presently wearing a black t-shirt, which you can see a little bit if I lean back, from one of my very favorite bands, who my friend is in, Egg Drop Soup. If you haven't heard of them, I suggest you do so as soon as you're done watching the stream. You go over and find them in your favorite music player as soon as possible. Before I introduce our guest for this show, I'd like to take a moment to thank first our veterans in the audience. Thank you for your service, and I am happy that you are home with us. I'd also like to thank and welcome those who might be tuning in for the first time. I'm really glad that you have found this show. Hopefully you enjoy our conversation. Through these conversations, I do hope we can continue to make the small steps necessary to make a more accessible future possible. And if you'd like to join into the conversation, please use the chat or feel free to tweet using the hashtag dismoveetc. Without further delay, I'd like to welcome Elayne Otstot. Elayne is a communications specialist from Huntsville, Alabama, whose work is driven by a passion for disability advocacy. Elayne is particularly dedicated to expanding public understanding of person-centered approaches and working with public agencies to make sure that support systems reflect person-centered values. Elayne is highly skilled in plain language communication, and she has deep experience in working with disability policy and home and community-based services. Elayne was a government relations intern at Centene, where her work addressed the HCBS bills and the development of policy roadmap for lobbyists. Currently, Elayne works as a communication and outreach coordinator on projects related to disability advocacy at the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Supports. Elayne has also worked with Issues Committee with the National Autism National Committee and EIN SOF's Lights, Camera, Access on several projects. When not working, like myself, Elayne enjoys riding and finding new bike routes, camping, and working on her photography. And with that, I would like to invite Elayne on. Elayne, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, sorry about the cat. He goes where he goes.
No worries, no worries. We love, that's sort of the small little joy of working from home and working remotely all these years as we get to see everybody's pets.
It's certainly been an interesting experience. So, I guess, what do you want to know?
Yeah, so, typically the way I like to start is I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to let you have, sort of this first few moments to either tell us all a story, tell us your experience of how trying to be active, trying to be working in health-related opportunities, what your experience has been with like that. Good, bad, all of it. That's what we're hoping to hear.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I graduated from UTA there, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex as part of their first run through the public health program. So it was quite the adventure because a lot of my professors themselves, they all had doctorates or at least a master's. And it was like, okay, well, no other department will take us but the kinesiology department. At least that's my understanding of it. But I was a student, and it's kind of like students hear all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like being part of the kinesiology department, you get to do all this stuff. You get to do the kinesiology labs. You get to do all the training and stuff for, they assume you want to go on to be a sports trainer or something like that. But instead, I, became more and more interested in policy through my own experiences. I'm so sorry. This cat is
That's
he's
okay.
jealous. He's jealous.
Yeah, he wants a little bit of the spotlight.
Yes. Through my own experiences, outside of class, I had some family friends going through some issues and they weren't getting the help they needed. Like, this is a public health issue that somebody who should be on disability or receive supports isn't getting the supports they need. And Texas is such a huge state. And because it's such a huge state, things can be disorganized. So, and at the time, I was also starting to kind of learn more and cope more with my own disabilities. Like, I started thinking, okay, I had fallen and screwed my right knee up, no problem. Mm-hmm. I'll just, work really hard and I won't have to deal with this anymore. But it's turned into a chronic thing. And then, senior year, I fall and basically twist my ankle and, pretty much dislocated everything in the ankle. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And it's not fine. Yeah. So come to find out, talking to family, that the loose joints and the things that tend to stretch and stay injured are hereditary. And I do more digging. It's like, oh, this is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. This is hypermobile joints. This is crap. So at the same time, I'm like, I have a learning disability. So I'm just being bombarded. On top of that, I've had migraines since I was a young adult. And I'm, medicated for them and it helps me get through my day. But it's just things where these are life-changing and I can manage them, but there are people who have it worse off in many ways, and they're part of a system where the system is unkind to them. Yeah. And it's like my experience has been, the system has potential, as unfortunate as that sounds, but we need to make the system work for the people, not the people work for the system, if that makes any sense.
No, it totally does.
So I kind of fell into the disability work. I got connected up with the Students for Disabilities office, basically, where they act as a go-between on campus to, like, I need accommodations for a test. I need accommodations, like more time to take a test, things like that. But they needed somebody to go to student government and say, hey, you got to include us too. So I ended up doing that for the 3 or 4 years I was at UTA, because I had transferred from Texas Women's over there in Denton. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was a very interesting experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I had read, a piece from the American Association of People with Disabilities that kind of profiled that piece about you. And you're kind of, from what it sounded like, you're almost tossed into the deep end of disability advocacy work and disability policy. So, could you talk a little bit more about how that all kind of went down and how you navigated it?
Yeah, so working for the Office for Students with Disabilities as their President's Roundtable representative, basically, you're going to student government once a month and saying, hey, these are the issues. We're going to weigh in on these, and I'm going to vote. And if I think this isn't good for us, I'm not going to vote in favor of it. And a lot of times, student president, student body would look for ways to not give me the invitation, to not give me the information I needed, so that they would have a way to strike our organization from the list. Because if you missed like 5 or less meetings in a semester, you're off the list. So I made it a point to meet every one of those time slots. I even went as far as to talk with my professors and say, hey, I have this going on. Do you mind if I leave class a little bit early? And they said, yeah, sure, it's a sanctioned school activity. Go right ahead.
Yeah.
And I kind of fell into it because nobody else wanted to do it.
I mean, that certainly seems to be the case, right? I mean, I think that's from what I hear from a lot of folks, even in my own experience, you sort of see there's an issue, you sort of see there's struggling, you might experience something a little bit yourself and then realize, well, nobody else is doing this, so I guess I kind of need to step up and do it myself.
Yeah, and at the time I thought, okay, this is relevant to public health. I'll learn something because Centers for Medicaid and Medicare services are part of the public health, broader sphere that we have to work within.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like, I'll learn something, I'll take something away from this, and then I can go on and do something else. But the thing is like I did this, and then I went on and I did the fellowship with Loyola Law at that's started by Tony Coelho himself in Los Angeles. They flew us out there for a week, and then for the rest of the year we did online class.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not crazy for thinking that public health policy and disability go together, because
Right.
that wasn't what my undergraduate focused on. My undergraduate was very focused on urban and communication.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, communication's really good. Communication is always applicable, but the urban's not really where I'm interested in because I have so many family members who live in rural areas. Like, I have family members who have to drive an hour at least to the nearest hospital. They just closed their hospital.
Wow. Especially when we think of all the stuff that's continuing to go on with the pandemic and everything. I mean, that's just, we talk so much about access, and particularly in academia, we talk about access, and I think we sometimes really forget how certain parts of the country really, how far out they might be, and how really a struggle it can be for them to just even find the most basic of things to access for their, I mean, not just physical activity, but broader health concerns.
Right. And I was living down in Waxahachie when I was going to school, and that's not really rural, but when we moved there 20 some odd years ago, my parents and I, it was rural.
Mm.
It, there wasn't a lot of infrastructure there, and it's still the case where the only good internet you can get is like cell tower based. They
Yeah.
won't run a broadband or AT&T hub out much past the highway there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier this week about how the more my academic scholarship kind of goes in the direction of not just looking at physical activity, but looking at physical activity in the bigger, broader context of health and society, and you start to realize it really starts bumping up to all these other issues that we face in society in terms of like say, relying on corporations to try to get access out to certain places, or if we even think of certain public health investments of recreation spaces, or gyms or pools or anything like that, it just becomes harder and harder when we start layering on everything. You still there, Elayne? Uh-oh. I see you're trying to talk. It's saying there, but I don't hear you. Joy of doing a live stream. I see the bubbles coming up on you, but I can't. You're frozen for me. I don't know why. Let me see. Let me see if I can hide you for a second, if take you off and then bring you back on, see if that works. There we go. Some technical glitches. I'm not getting anything. I see the bubbles coming up for you, Elayne, but I'm not hearing anything on my end. This is weird. I'm going to try. Huh. Hey, Elayne, you there? I see the thing coming up saying you're talking, but I can't hear you. Maybe refresh your browser. Maybe that'll help. Sorry, folks. Watching. Hopefully we'll resolve this soon. Joy of doing live streams. Well, y'all, thanks for coming back and hanging out. We're just waiting on Elayne to join us back, having a little technical difficulty. Hopefully get this worked out soon. Well, if you're watching, if you're joining, we've got struggling a little bit. Can't seem to have lost Elayne. But I'll take any questions. We're trying to get her back in. Hopefully we can finish our conversation. Oh, come on. Now I'm frozen. All right. Da-da-da-da. I seem to have lost Elayne. There we go.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I think my internet hates me.
Oh, no worries. No worries. All I know is we were going and then frozen.
Yeah, I grabbed the cable to hardwire back in.
All right. Well, that seems to be better. I think I've got you now. So
Okay, good.
Yeah, we can just pick up where we left off. And I guess we can I guess we were talking about how you kind of got tossed into this sort of world of disability advocacy, and funny enough, you have connection to Denton, which is where I'm at right now. Although you're at TW, our sister college here. So I guess it'd be awesome if you could talk about how sort of those early experiences sort of provided the foundation for, and what it sounds like is kind of a direction you weren't expecting to go in, how that kind of all occurred.
Yeah, so I wanted to be a nurse, like just about every other person who ends up at TW. I thought, okay, I really like science. I can deal with the people part, but I really like science. So like, okay, I'll, go get a nursing degree. And then it's one of those things where I'm looking at stability and trying to think, okay, how is this going to benefit me in the long run? And I could not hack the math for chemistry or the math for TW has this crazy quantum qualitative analysis course that gives everybody nightmares. And it's like, okay, I did okay with basic algebra, but this is something else entirely. I do not understand how this applies. And then, I would get major anxiety attacks sitting for the big American Chemical Society exam at the end of the semester that all the chem courses make you take. And it's like, we never covered any of this. We never covered any of this. And I'm pretty sure we did. I just didn't stick.
Right. Yep. Now I know how that is.
Yeah. So I ended up dropping from the nursing major and moving over to biology, thinking, okay, it's still the sciences. I like it better. I don't have to deal with people as much. I'm not, having somebody constantly, beat on that drum. You will kill somebody if you get this wrong. Mm-hmm. And that was another thing to worry about as a nursing major. Like, am I going to kill somebody because I'm not good at math? Yeah. And then I was still having some problems with math. I transferred to UTA as a microbiology major, and what I wanted to do with microbiology was not what UTA wanted me to do with microbiology. I was interested in like the epidemiology type stuff. So when public
Mm-hmm.
health came along, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take the class. I need another elective. And then they open it up as a major, and it's like, it'll take all my nursing credits. It'll take all these other credits that I don't know what to do with. And then that's pretty much how I ended up in public health. But then the disability end of it is I had to go get testing for a learning disorder because I was doing pretty bad in chemistry again because somebody said, you need to take chemistry as a micro major. Like, okay, yeah, I can believe that. But at the same time, I was doing badly to the point where the dean of the department, really nice guy, just said, you're going to have to figure this out.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Oh, no, I was just going to say, was disability, so I mean, was that your first personal experience when getting diagnosed with a learning disability in college, or had that been a part of your identity before then?
That had not been a part of my identity. I am what they call, I guess, a late diagnosis, adult diagnosis of a learning disability, or, not one of those neurotypical individuals.
Yep.
So
my wife and I fall in the same camp. So.
Yep. So it's one of those things where you get the diagnosis and then you're like, now what do I do? Because nobody told me how to do this. And a lot of times adult diagnoses don't get the same amount of support that some childhood diagnoses do, because it's great that the kids get this support, but if you're an adult, you're kind of like handed a pamphlet and said, here you go, do some reading. Like,
good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Like, that's helpful, but I need somebody to kind of hold my hand, guide me through this, and now what do I do?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess those was kind of happening at the same time then, right? You're introducing kind of your studies into disability, but also going through your own exploration of your own disabilities. And could you talk about how either that helped or maybe it didn't in some way, either case?
I think in some ways it was a struggle. I ended up at counseling services at UTA a lot just to kind of sort through what was going on. Let's see. It helped studies-wise because I was able to draw that connection between public health and then disability, where it's like, okay, these two should be connected, but why are they not more connected?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that kind of it stems into your your online moniker, right, of public health girl. And so I guess first, what does public health mean to you? Because I know it's defined in many, many ways, and depending on who you talk to, there's different things that are or are not included. So I guess for you, what does it mean?
Well, for me, public health is, we define professionally, and I don't want to throw shade at anybody or anything. I just want to say, professionally, it's defined as this. It's things like the brain. It's things like the social determinants of health. It's things like epidemiology. It's things like vaccines. All these things that are very obviously health. But public health, to me, is also making sure that programs get people what they need, and that these programs aren't losing sight of the people they need to benefit, because sometimes they can get so bogged down in red tape, and that frustrates even the people who are working for these programs. They're like, I want to do more, but I can't. My hands are tied.
Yeah. Yeah.
Public health,
Absolutely.
I think, should be a way to kind of bridge that gap between, the people and the programs and policies and things in place that should be able to help them.
Right. And so how does that relate to disability then?
So you have things like disability support services, and you have things like self-direction and person-centered planning. And a lot of that involves bringing the person back into those programs and bringing these programs back to that idea of nothing about us without us. And somebody, told me once that we need to make sure that everybody who needs to be here has a seat at the table. And if they don't have a seat at the table, you need to look and see why they don't have a seat there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the more and more I think about it, and really my whole kind of purpose for doing this is to try and make the table a little bit bigger, right? To give a space, even just a little one. I don't have a huge space yet, but use a little bit and try to help expand that and bring those issues to people's awareness. Because I think, and you can correct me if I may be wrong in my assumption, but I think a lot of people probably don't mean to exclude disabled folks, or don't mean to necessarily not provide access or provide services, but they might not know, because we don't really talk about disability. It's not really a part of discourse in a way that folks who aren't necessarily affected with it, either personally or through family members, more understand that, because it's been so sort of shunned in society.
Right. So there's been a lot of talk in the last year, maybe more, about disability, but a lot of what's going on when services are not provided is, well, we don't know how. And you tell them how, and then they say, oh, well, this is great, but you need to do it yourself. Like, I'm asking you to provide, or you're not disabled enough. Like, okay, what constitutes as disabled enough, and what constitutes as, being completely abled? Because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, are we playing gatekeeper here? And I've seen some of it, and people are going to hate me for saying this, I've seen some of it in the disability community itself, where it's like, you're not disabled enough, or you're, the wrong kind of disability, or your politics are wrong, all kinds of things. And that just boils down to, like Dr. Seuss and the Sneetches is like, you're different. You're not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately,
right.
The lesson of that story that Dr. Seuss wrote, and I'm not saying that Dr. Seuss is a great guy, I'm saying that the story has a good overall idea here, is that they found a way to combine their differences and live together, which is something I would like to see more of, and less of this, he said, she said type back channel things.
Yeah. And I think it goes to even some of the broader issues that are being discussed when we're talking about racism, we're talking about sexism and homophobia, and we're talking and addressing about each of these. And for so many years, a number of advocates have been saying, hey, these are all interconnected. They're all a piece of the same problem. And if in our own group we're not addressing these things, even though, we might be advocating for disabled rights, but if we're not advocating for every person's disabled rights, no matter what, it's still a problem. And I think I've felt it personally. It was a long road just to accept my own disabilities, because for a long time I have ADHD and depression. And for a long time it was, I had a lot of internalized kind of ableist beliefs of, well, I'm not that disabled, right? Or I'm not, I can't identify as disabled because, well, I've got it better off than some other folks do. And it really took a lot of self-reflection to understand, well, that's not necessarily the case. It's, we're all fighting the same fight. It's just, we're all starting in maybe a little different place, or we might need a little different support.
Right. We're all fighting the same fight. And I mean, I play tabletop, so it's like we're all different classes, we're all different levels, and we need to work together as a team, because if we don't, we're screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in going down to the root base of the argument. I was just reading, her name's missing me, Stacey Ann Chin's poem, All Oppressions Are, what was it? I can't remember the name of it. All oppressions are interconnected, or all oppressions are connected. That's her poem. And just realizing how each of these identities is so intertwined. And when we're fighting one and not addressing another, we're just perpetuating that same system. And it just is kind of a never-ending cycle that allows those that are in the positions of power to just kind of keep the status quo, And so I guess because for me, in working in physical activity and being in kinesiology, I often feel like it's almost a afterthought, right? That we're not necessarily included in these ideas of discussing public health, or even looking at other areas of injustice and inaccessibility. It's kind of physical activity, kinesiology kind of gets put over here when, of course, in my biased opinion, we tend to be kind of everywhere, right? We impact everywhere. So I guess having that experience studying kinesiology and kind of going through there, how do you see physical activity and kinesiologists fitting into a broader public health goal?
Yeah, so I think kinesiology really does play a really important part. I mean, you get to learn about nutrition, you get to learn about things like how the body moves, you get to learn all kinds of really interesting stuff about the physical aspect of, staying healthy. But at the same time, it's like, okay, kinesiology tends to want to profile everything. Kinesiology wants to tend to profile everything as male and, like 18 to 20 something. And they tend to forget that, movement and the ability to move or find joy from movement depends on the person. And I ride a road bike. It took me several used bikes off of Craigslist until somebody in my family decided, hey, you really seem to be enjoying this. Why don't we get you a brand new one all to yourself, no problem, so you can stop harassing the guy at the bike shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brand new one, all yours, never been ridden before. And it's a lot of fun. But at the same time, you see some gatekeeping where it's like, I'm not fast enough, I'm not riding in the right gear, I'm, not doing this correctly. And sometimes kinesiology gets so bogged down in the technical aspect of it that they forget that, movement can bring joy for people. And for some people, it hurts. I mean, I've got bad days.
Mm-hmm.
I have days where I don't want to be doing it. I have days where it is hard, but sometimes just working through the pain, and everybody's going to be different, is the difference between, a better day, not necessarily a really good day, but a slightly better day, and a really, really bad day where I'm just, flat out on the sofa,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I wish kinesiology would realize that there's more to the profile of an athlete or somebody who is looking to be healthy for reasons other than sports or what have you.
Absolutely. I think that to me touches a really important point, that we even in society, broadly, you think of athletics, and we think about professional athletes, and we think about folks who excel and exceed, and we don't think about just the fact that sport can be fun, activity can be fun, and that's the important piece of it, right? I mean, we hopefully get health benefits from it. We hopefully are able to find community and find folks similar to ourselves and all those great things. It doesn't have to be a competition, right? It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to necessarily be organized for you to have or get benefit from it. And I think that's for disabled folks, and the work I do often focuses on autistic individuals and their experiences, is that's been a huge piece, is just, if we're talking about health and being healthy, physical activity is so important, but we don't, as you said, even in other aspects, we don't have opportunities or access for folks to find those things, just general joy, because I think too often you're right, kinesiology, we say this is the right way to do it, and if you don't do it this way, well, you probably shouldn't be doing it, right? So I guess in from a public health perspective, how can we be more supportive for disabled folks in terms of accessing physical activity, or even making communities more accessible for physical activity?
Yeah, sure. So the area I just moved to, I moved from Dallas to Huntsville this fall, and everybody here, there's sidewalks, they're, relatively accessible. I don't feel like I'm going to get flattened by a dump truck that happened to somebody in the bike club I was in back in Dallas. But it's like people are doing it right here for some reason. It's like people that, some words, something that kinesiology can do is encourage people to get out and just move. Find joy in a walk around the block with your dog, or your favorite podcast. I've done that. Or
this podcast, right? This show.
Yeah. Hey, whatever works. Or, buy yourself an inexpensive bike from Walmart and hit the bike trail in your community. Just please wear a helmet.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
like, it doesn't have to be super technical. And that's what I want kinesiology to remember. It's like, please, 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 please encourage people to find joy in the movement, to, find ways to make it accessible. There are things like running frames for people who have difficulty standing while running, and there are recumbent bikes. There's a lot of equipment that kinesiology just doesn't seem to recognize as a thing.
Yeah, we already have a lot of sort of accessibility aids. We just probably have too much ingrained stigma to see them as options, and particularly for folks who, I think, probably acquire disability at a later stage in life and now have to totally reconstruct potentially their identity as an athlete, and the fact it might look different. What barriers, I mean, other than the obvious, the ones we just talked about, but what other barriers from a public health perspective exist in trying to get people physically active?
A lot of it is stigma, and for some people, it really is racism. I've seen cases recently of people of color who are out jogging, biking, running, what have you, being set on by some jerk who thinks he's got something to prove and thinks that he's basically the neighborhood watch for the entire community, and he's self-appointed himself as that. Yeah. And it's like, no, I mean, I want these people to feel safe and be out there enjoying, whatever, if this is their way of blowing off steam. if this is their way of processing through their day. I want them to have that ability. And right now, that is one of the biggest things I'm seeing is, just the racism. And then you've got the, stigma, the fat phobia, just the craziness that is going on with just your body's not right. And it's like, no, if you're out there, you have a body and you are moving it and you are enjoying yourself, then you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and again, I think it's a point where some of it, probably a lot of it, is intentional and is rooted in racist negative beliefs, but also it's sometimes subtle and just messaging. I think, when I use even our rec center here at the university, and I go in, you see a certain type of person there, and if that person doesn't look like you feel that difference. When you try to access any of the equipment, if it's not set up for you as a wheelchair user, or if you have a visual impairment or whatever, if the constant messages are, you're not welcome here, your body type is not welcome here, I mean, you sort of get to a point of like, well, what's the point? Right? I mean, it's sometimes I think we don't do enough to really address those aspects, particularly as kinesiologists, but I think broadly as society. Do we have any examples, though, of places, organizations, even people that are getting things right, or maybe even some things right?
I haven't found one yet. I'm still looking, and that's just because, like I said, this is still kind of uncharted territory for me. I've been hacking a lot on my own, but if you're interested in hiking, I correct myself. There is disabled hikers, and then there
I
is.
Just talked with Siren. Yeah, I talked with Siren last show. So yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. So she's doing wonderful stuff.
There's disabled hikers, and then there's Jenny Brusso from Unlikely Hikers. She's how I kind of found out about the whole, size issues with women's clothing and everything.
Yeah, that's very cool. I've not heard of that one. I'll have to check them out. That's very cool. So as a part of your work, I know you now work as an outreach specialist, and you've also done some stuff in film and helping out with that. Could you talk about what your roles have been there, and then how does that fit in sort of the broader aspect of your public health advocacy?
At the Alliance, it's a lot of communications, making sure that the communications are disability centric and the language is correct for the audience that it's going to. Like, we have things that go to organizational partners, but what we really want to concentrate on is that our members feel like our language is inclusive and reflective of them as people with disabilities. And then we have, our webinars and a couple other things that we've done in the past that talk about some of the issues that people with disabilities are going through. And then for film, it's mostly been about the creative end of, I'm a person with a disability, I can do this too, I have a story to tell. Like Invalid Core was talking about a very real group of men during the Civil War. They were Union soldiers, they were disabled, they were considered next to useless, but there was an actual group, a regiment. Military terms are not my thing, so if somebody would like to correct me, please feel free. But basically they fought part of the war too. They were used as prisoner transport. They were, supply depot, all kinds of things. Day Al-Muhammad, it's her film. She's produced a lot of other stuff too that's reflective of disability history.
Oh, Yeah, I just purchased from Bookshop the Disabled History of the United States. It's hopefully getting here tomorrow, so I'm excited to read that. But just a whole kind of aspect of history that's there that is really looked over, that we don't really talk about much at all. I think it's absolutely important. We do have some questions coming in, and I think with the first one being, could you speak to your experience from a female perspective in terms of accessibility while being disabled, and then having to ask or having to find aid when needed? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the way I grew up was a disability is a weakness, and having to ask for assistance, especially if you're female, is really bad. And I've had professors that I've had to go to and say, I need help. I don't understand this. And they were male professors, cis het male white professors. Like,
Mm-hmm.
A meme that I can quote is basic white guy or average white guy, that sort of level of confidence.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. I might have to use that one.
And they're like, if you need help, you need to drop this class. And that's my experience in asking for help is like, okay, you would have given this to a male student, but you wouldn't have given it to me. And I'm asking for help. I understand the assignment is due today and I'm willing to take a 0 on it. I just want to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've flown with braces and stuff. And TSA seems to really like to single me out because I do not like to wear what they, I guess, think is appropriate clothing. I wear leggings and big sweaters. They think I'm hiding something.
Mm-hmm.
I flew to Tash in 2019 and going through Yuma, Arizona, because that was how my ticket was cheapest. They made me take my shoes off and run them through the scanner thinking it had a bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, flying with any type of aid is a struggle. And I know there's, her name is escaping me right now, but just the whole situation with United,
the wheelchair.
and it's awful. I mean, just trying to do that. And then again, as a female trying to even ask for that help, there's already that built-in bias.
Yeah, you think that, okay, if I ask for help, are they going to think I'm faking it? Or are they going to think I'm asking for attention? What are they thinking? What's going through their mind? Because, as a female, a lot of times you're raised to do as much for yourself as possible, because if you ask for help, somebody might take advantage of you.
Yeah. And it's sad that is essentially the reinforced story that we're telling women and continue to tell women no matter what. And then
it really is.
And then layer on top of it, right, disability and any other type of potential minoritized or otherized condition, or not condition, but other, identity that one might have, right? It's just layers on layers. I had another question about ableism particularly, but have you felt you've experienced ableism more in Texas or the South, or is this something we need to really address across the country?
I think it's something that should be addressed across the country. Honestly, it's not limited to geographic locations. It's not limited to the South. It's not limited to Texas. It's a product of human nature and the media teaching us a lot of really unfortunate things, especially on social media.
Yeah. And it just exacerbates, right? I mean,
it just exacerbates it.
Yeah. If we, I mean, I've not read all of them, but of course, reading some of the Facebook files that are released on Instagram, and just body image alone, right? I mean, and these are kids, and I mean, mostly girls, but kids who, I mean, probably they aren't disabled, or they aren't a minority, they aren't someone who might be trans, and we know it's impacting them. We can't even, I don't begin to fathom the impact it has on kids who don't have that representation, to realize they don't see themselves in somebody, or it's, either explicitly or implicitly told to them, not something that you can talk about, right? It's not something that you should be happy or proud of, or anything along those lines.
Yeah, and women can be some of the meanest to each other, not just men, but women.
Yeah. I think it probably has, something involved with just people wanting to hold on to that little bit maybe that they have, and not realizing that if we only just say, let's be a little more open. Like you said, I think, I looked at your stickers on your Redbubble, and I love the one about the pie. And you're absolutely right that, like, we're not dividing up pieces of pie here. Like, it's not solely, it's not an infinite, right? Giving up a little bit of one's privilege is not equivalent to the oppression of somebody else. And I think
right. Rights and privileges are not finite. And just because somebody has something or let me rephrase that. Just because somebody doesn't have something does not mean that you need to prevent them from getting it. It means that you might need to look at why they don't have that.
Right. Exactly. I know you run your own website and blog that's focused on public health and disability inclusion. And what, in your opinion, what are things that we can address, whether it's in our own community, our own little space, that we have control over? And then what might be some things that we could try to push for, organize, or help find in a broader sense? So maybe those are two questions separately, so you feel free to answer them independently or together.
Inclusion is usually, when I'm talking about it, I'm usually talking based on my experience. And other people have had different experiences in relation to inclusion. But I think that we really need to focus on things like education and access to, basic rights. Like, if you're able to vote and you can't go vote because the polling place isn't accessible, then that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, complete a class or whatever because captions or ASL isn't available, then that is a problem, and that is, I believe, a violation, I want to say, of 504.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing is, school districts act like they don't even care.
Yep. Yeah, it's a major problem. As somebody who is an educator on this side, absolutely. I think it just, even working with parents in trying to get them access, say, here's what you are legally entitled to. Sometimes they're so afraid to lose what they already have that they won't advocate or fight for what they already are legally able, that they are entitled to begin with. So, good old cat butt. That's a good thing to have in a live stream. So no worries at all. But I know we're about at time. We've been talking for a long while. I'm sure, Elayne, I could talk with you all day about this. You've given me a lot to think about, and I hope you've given those listening stuff to think about as well. I guess I'd like to, finish by letting you kind of say, in your perfect world, what do you envision for folks in terms of public health? What are we shooting for?
I just really, in perfect world, I really want people to be able to gain access to the supports they need, be able to afford basic necessities. I've heard from, I've seen so many GoFundMe's and things like, I need help getting out of debt. I need help this. I need help that. And it's like, if we could just, pay people decently, because that's part of a social determinant of health. And one of those things where it's like, I understand that some jobs are really, really awful. I've worked my fair share, but I just want everybody to be able to be taken care of, to be able to, live a comfortable life, not necessarily
Yeah.
take care of themselves and take care of their loved ones.
Yeah. I think that's a good goal to strive for. Elayne, again, thank you so much. I really appreciated our conversation. Thanks so much again for joining and being one of the your number 3 guest on the show. So I super appreciate it. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I'm gonna send you into the green room here. Well, and I'd like to finish by saying again, I'd like to thank Elayne for joining me on the show as our 3rd guest. It's hard to believe I only have one more left for the year. It's already November. I haven't even processed 2020, and it's almost the end of 2021. So if you'd like to support Elayne, you can head over to her website. It's publichealthgirl, all one word, wordpress.com, or over to her Redbubble shop, which is redbubble.com/people/pubhealthgirl, P-U-B, health girl, all one word. I'll put that in the show notes as well. She's got some pretty cool stickers up there, which I may or may not be buying shortly after this show ends. If you missed any part of our conversation today, you can watch the replay here on YouTube, or you can listen to the whole show as a podcast, which I'll be releasing them very soon. The trailer's out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just about wherever else you might listen. As a reminder, this was our 3rd show. I have one more planned for the fall. You can find that at luma, lu.ma/thathippieprof, in which I'll also be putting in to the show notes. You can register, let me know what you're coming. When you do, you'll also get signed up for my semi-regular, mostly snarky newsletter. I won't spam you, promise. If you'd like to support this show or others that I'm working on, you can do so at Patreon. It's patreon.com/thathippieprof. You can also find some merch at thathippiestore.square.site. I'd like to thank my friend Adrian Doc Blust for composing the music for this show. And lastly, I want to thank all of you. Thank you for being here. I'm happy you're here. I hope you join me next time. We'll see you later.
Boy. You didn't press her if it was worse in the South.